morning. It's nice to see so many people up so early on a Saturday morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Alberta Settlement Outcome Survey today and about some of the questions that this session posed. And so to begin, let me just talk about the scope and objectives. This survey had a very broad scope. We know that there were limited data available in Alberta on settlement services and outcomes. And so the goal was to increase the effectiveness and utilization of services by understanding settlement needs of immigrants, gaps in services, how we might improve current services and modes of delivery, how we might design new resources and services, new pre-arrival services and information, which we all know are very important, effective marketing initiatives for recruiting new immigrants and informing them of the services available to them. I mentioned this yesterday, so this was a survey administered using computer-assisted telephone interviewing. Just over 1,000 immigrants in Alberta, all over 18 years of age and over. And the sample size provided a good margin of error and a good confidence level in the results. As I said, the potential participants were identified and contacted using the data file provided by CIC of everybody who had arrived within 5 years. And it was a random sampling design, so from the sample that we were provided with, or the population we were provided with, we selected our sample. Importantly, the final survey was professionally edited to CLB5 so that we tried to ensure that people would understand the questions. The survey was administered in a number of different languages, the main languages of immigrants in Alberta, including English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Punjabi. Interestingly, many of our respondents responded in English, and they had a choice of what language they responded in and which survey they took, and many of them chose the English survey. So this survey was quite extensive. It included a number of blocks. Today I'm only going to talk about 3 of the blocks: experiences with settlement services, information needs and access, and economic integration and outcomes. The report, as I mentioned yesterday, is on the Alberta Human Services website. So if you are interested in social integration and outcomes, attachment to Alberta and to Canada, well-being and life satisfaction, and some of the demographics, please take a look at the report. You can see that the survey took quite a long time to complete, an average of 34.5 minutes. And the response rate was 36% for eligible individuals. So where the person was contacted, the phone number was used, asked for a specific person, and that person was still at that phone number. Okay, so to start, let me just talk about experiences with settlement services and use of settlement information. As I said yesterday, in this survey, we found that 47% of our respondents had used services since their arrival in Alberta. And again, we did list very specific services, describe the services, and explained what we meant by services for immigrants. So this is the response that we got. And as I mentioned yesterday as well, employment services and English language assessment and instruction were the most commonly used services. Okay, we were really interested in how long it takes people to use services. So we asked people how long they had been in Alberta before they started using each type of service. So this was individually for each type of service. And what you can see is that information about living in Alberta and referrals and also community connections were used earliest. But on average, it took up to 6 months for people to start using services, on average. Okay, so it's taking a while for people to actually start using services within the province. And we asked respondents what they perceived to be the effectiveness of the services. Overall responses are quite high, so I should have mentioned this is on a 7-point scale. All our responses are on 7-point scales. And you can see that employment services are seen as a bit less effective than the other services. We were also interested in whether geographical location influenced perceived helpfulness of services. And what you see here is that respondents who were in smaller northern communities were especially likely to say that immigrant services were helpful for them. In terms of the types of difficulties people experienced, first we asked people who used services whether they had experienced any specific difficulties in obtaining the help they needed to settle in Alberta. And what you can see is that so these are service users. The top three things they're saying is that there's a lack of information or awareness of services, confusion about who to go to in order to get help, and language difficulties. Okay, so this issue of information and the fact that information isn't necessarily available about where services are or how to get services, or confusion about where to go to get help comes up over and over again. We also asked non-users what reasons they had for not using services. We found that the number one reason was don't need help to settle in Alberta. But number two reason and number three reason are again the same things, lack of information and confusion. Okay, so this does suggest that information to some extent is a problem, and we need to perhaps do a better job of this. We asked our respondents what type of services would have been helpful to receive prior to arrival in Canada. And what you can see here is that a lot of it has to do with employment. So assessment of international education and experience, which we're now doing, connections with possible employers. But the other thing that I thought was quite interesting was orientation to Canadian culture and way of life. Okay, so this was something that people also wanted before arriving, knowing something about Canada and what our way of life is like. We also asked not only about the type of services that would be helpful to receive prior to arrival, but also the type of information that would be useful. So, would you like this information? When would it be most useful? Before arrival, after arrival, or both? And what's interesting here is that it seems that before arrival, people want the orientation. They want to know what things they need to do before they come. They want to know what documents they need before they come so that they have them with them. And they want to know where to obtain settlement information once they arrive in Canada. Some of the things like healthcare, knowing about housing, getting a job, a lot of people are saying both, but a lot of people are saying I could get that information once I arrive. But what's most important is knowing where to get the information. It's important for me to know once I get there how I'm going to find what I need. Okay, and finally I'm going to talk about economic integration and outcomes. And unlike the sample that Audrey was looking at, many of our respondents were employed, either employed full-time or employed part-time. And we asked people to describe their employment. What was the position that you held? Describe the position. And then we scored these positions. So we had 1,006 that we had to score, or 1,006 respondents. So some of these people aren't employed, but many of them are employed. We asked them to describe their employment, and then we scored these using the NOC. You can see that in this sample, many people are in sales and service occupations. When we look at the distribution of employed individuals' personal earnings before taxes and deductions, many of them are earning between $10 to $20 an hour, some in the $20 to less than $30, and then dwindling for the higher salary rates. In terms of difficulty obtaining a job in the province, there's quite a wide variety of responses. So some people are not having difficulty obtaining a job. Some people are having a lot of difficulty. So extremely difficult to find a job that makes use of my qualifications. You can see, over 20% of people are saying this is a problem for them. And we asked them, people who said that they were having trouble getting a job that made use of their qualifications, why they thought that was the case. And some of the things that our respondents provided fit with what we would expect. They don't have Canadian experience, and employers don't accept their qualifications as equal. I thought it was also interesting that a number of people said that they don't have connections that would help them obtain a job. They don't have those networks. They don't have the social capital. Okay, finally, what about length of time in Alberta? And what's interesting is that economic outcomes improve over time, or it looks like they improve over time. Of course, what we don't know is whether people who don't find jobs or don't do well economically in the province leave, right? So that by the time you get to 5 years, people who've been there 5 years, you're left with the people who've had good economic outcomes. But to some extent, we know that many people are staying, and this suggests that there are economic improvements over time. So about the 3-year mark, we find that the number of people who are employed full-time is going up. The number of people who are employed part-time is going down, so they're going from those part-time positions maybe to the full-time positions. We see that earnings are changing. So by about 2 to 3 years, people who are earning less than $20 an hour, the percentage of people who are earning less than $20 an hour goes down. The people who are earning the higher earnings are going up. More people are earning more. And in terms of the mean difficulty in finding a job that makes use of qualifications, you can see again by about the 3-year point, the number of people who are saying that they're having a really hard time finding a job that makes use of their qualifications is going down. Okay, so this was obviously very brief. Let me just summarize what the main themes are that emerge. First of all, in general, immigrants in Alberta are doing quite well. We see that their economic outcomes are improving over time, or at least there's suggestive evidence that their economic outcomes are improving over time. We find that just under half of immigrants are using settlement services, and those who do rate these services quite highly overall. And we see that immigrants in smaller northern communities find settlement services particularly helpful. We also find, however, that immigrants in Alberta report major information gaps that hinder their ability to access and utilize services and that impede their settlement and integration. This is back to this issue of information, confusion about who to go to get help. And thus, I would conclude that improving information delivery to immigrants pre-arrival and in Canada may be the single most important thing that we can do to support settlement and integration in Canada. Thank you.